Utah's newly revealed schedule puts them in a favorable position to bounce back and win the Big 12 in 2025.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interact with everyone in the YouTube comments, and you can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by the host of Locked On College Football, Spencer McLaughlin, kind enough to stop by. 2 segments today. We got Spencer for. So we're special. Schedule release must have dropped. And look, we knew the opponents ahead of time. So when this schedule did release, I feel like it actually is the best outcome for how these games could have lined up. This schedule features Utah plays 9 conference games, right? 8 of them come against teams that finished inside the top 10 of the Big 12 a season ago. So of the bottom 5, because Utah's in there too, you only get 1 of them. So that's not favorable, but 5 conference games at home, only 4 on the road, no back-to-back road games, and buys before you play Arizona State and travel to Waco. So for as far as how this schedule could shake out, I feel like it's actually pretty favorable, and that's why I feel like it puts Utah in the best position they could be in to bounce back and win the conference in 25, Spencer.
Well, I'm glad you added that stipulation in there, because I was wondering if we were looking at the same schedule, man. This is brutal. This is welcome to the new conference. We don't want you to win it. You stunk in the first year, and we want you to stay down as long as you can. Like, this feels deliberate from Brett Yormark and company to have their opponents line up like this, because I'm with you. The ordering makes it more tenable. You don't have consecutive conference road games, even factoring in buys. It doesn't exist. So that's the good news, is you'll never have to be away from Rice-Eccles Stadium for more than 1 week. But I tell you what, man, there are a lot of Big 12 schedules that work out in your favor more than this one does, because the caliber of opponents to have not just the defending champs in Arizona State, and of course BYU is going to be in there, but to also have Texas Tech and both Kansas schools. Now, the good news is, of those 3 opponents, 2 of them are at home. That's great. But to have to go through them all, this is as much of a gauntlet of a Big 12 schedule as you can find. And I fully do not agree with what you said in the cold open of this segment, which is it puts them in position to win the Big 12. I think it does the exact opposite, because it's not like you can coast to the finish with 2 of your last 3 on the road, one of which is on a short week, by the way. Potentially, there's a flex option, it appears, for that Kansas game on either November 28th or November 29th, a Friday or a Saturday. So you could be playing in Lawrence on a short week after playing Kansas State at home, and the week before that at Baylor, that had a great finish to the end of last season. I'm not picking Utah to get to the Big 12 championship game with this schedule until they show me something, man. There's so much that has to change. I know, new OC, Dampier at quarterback, that's great. That's all good and fine. But you got to show me something for this schedule, and Utah right now has shown me they missed a bowl game.
Yeah, it's rough in terms of the lack of the draw. I already brought up. I mean, you miss 5 of the bottom teams in the conference. You only get 1 of that 5. Like, that's where it's unfortunate. You only get Cincinnati in that, and that I feel like is Utah's probably easiest Big 12 game. But like, you could argue from there, like maybe the second easiest is like the West Virginia Colorado game. But you still have to make that trip all the way out to West Virginia. Like that's tough. It's a haul to have to go out there for Utah. And yes, I will say the one thing I like about the schedule, at least, is, Kansas State, Baylor, and Kansas, you play them all towards the end of the schedule, where I feel like Utah should be playing their best ball, that by then Dampier settling and all things like that. Now, like we mentioned, you don't start easy, because you get Texas Tech right away too, but because of the quality of the games too that Utah gets at home, that's what leaves me excited. I don't have to go too Provo this year, but that game, it just feels like in this rivalry, it is one where you can, as the cliche says, throw out the records. It's always going to come down to a player or two. So that's where, Spencer, I just like that Utah does have some of their biggest games down the stretch. I know it risks them being banged up, but I feel like they'll be playing. I mean, you covered teams like an Oregon team last year too, and I know they started hot, but that's a lot of new pieces you're still fitting together. That's where I think
started hot. 13-0 is starting. They actually started cold.
Well, that's
and then got hot a little bit. I love that 13-0 is starting hot though. Like first half of the season, they were playing some good ball, but second half of the season cooled off a bit en route to a Big Ten championship, and then got their teeth kicked in by Ohio State. Sorry, I just found that phrasing to be.
No, then cool. No, that was fair. That's fair to say that. But I do want to know for you, like, where do you look at as the toughest stretch of this schedule? I would probably say it's the last 3 games, but as I said, I'm okay with that. I'd rather have your toughest games be towards the end than the beginning. Maybe you have the time to recover from that loss, but I feel like you'll be playing in terms of we will be playing our best ball late in November, as I feel like this Utah team does. That's where it's an advantage.
I agree with that. I don't agree that that's the toughest stretch. I think your toughest stretch is at West Virginia, host Arizona State, at BYU. Now, you have a bye mixed in there between West Virginia and Arizona State, so at home off a bye lessens that blow. But let's not forget, that's the reigning Big 12 champion Arizona State Sun Devils to you and me and everybody else who are returning a lot, including their coaching staff and their quarterback. And they don't have Cameron Scadaboo, but they have a lot of really good pieces. They have done well in the portal. Right now, at least the last time I checked, according to our friends at FanDuel, they are tied with Kansas State for the best odds to win the Big 12 championship this year. So I think that they are, along with Kansas State, the best team on paper that you face, along with Texas Tech. And this is where the benefit of this schedule comes into play for Utah. I stand by what I said earlier, that it's tough, and I don't know that they can navigate this to get back to the Big 12 championship game. But the 3 best teams you've got on paper here in the Big 12 are, in no particular order, Arizona State, Kansas State, and Texas Tech. And Tech could be really good next year. They've had an awesome top 5 portal class this offseason with Baron Morton coming back, Joey McGuire another year. Hopefully they're going to be able to reload for their own sake on the defensive side of the ball, because it was atrocious last year. But they still found a way to be an 8-4 team in the regular season. All 3 of those games are at home. That's a significant break. BYU on the road, that hurts. Baylor, Kansas, I'd rather play them on the road than Kansas State or Arizona State. So I think that stretch of at West Virginia, host Arizona State, at BYU, and frankly, tossed in the Texas Tech as well. I think the beginning of Big 12 play is tougher for Utah than the back half is, because Cincinnati is okay. Baylor might have just been kind of a late flash in the pan. I don't know if they're super sustainable going into next season. Kansas State is really good. Kansas has got a really low floor, but maybe a high ceiling, potentially. But after the BYU game, I feel like the Utes are winning 3 of those games minimum of their final 5 down the stretch, and I would not be surprised if it was 4.
Yeah, it's a tough go. I mean, for them to finish the season 3-0 and for them to start the season 4-0 in conference play would be really impressive.
Oh, if they start the season 4-0 and they're going to be 3-0 in their non-conference, and sure. I feel pretty good saying that. But if they were to start 4-0 with Texas Tech at West Virginia, Arizona State at BYU, catapults them to the top 10 immediately. Yeah. Because that's as brutal of a stretch of Big 12 football as you can find.
Mm-hmm. The opponents are there for if Utah wants to bounce back and get into the college football playoff, they should have the resume, assuming their opponents keep up their end of the bargain, but Utah will also have to keep up their end of the bargain.
But you have to be 11-1 or be 10-2, get to the conference title game and win, as we saw this past year. 10-2 BYU didn't even get half a discussion compared to what they deserved.
No. Yeah, they probably did deserve more. You're right. Even I, the Utah guy, could say they deserve more discussion.
Yes. Them and Miami both. Like, yeah. You gotta take from last season anyway, take that SEC shine off of the resumes, and you realize, oh, yeah, those 9-3 teams had ugly losses, didn't have as many good wins as you'd think. Like, so that's where it has to be. If you're talking playoff for any Big 12 team, you have to be a conference champ, or you have to be 11-1 in the regular season, minimum.
Yeah, and I think they'll get off to a good start. I think they'll start 3-0 in the non-conference, win their season opener. Utah won their season opener last year, right, Spencer? I was trying to remember who they play.
Yeah, I think they did. I think they played a team. Oh gosh, who was it? It's not coming to my mind right now. It's just completely escaped me.
T Burrs or anyway.
I don't remember.
I don't remember
recall. I'm Wolf of Wall Street here. I don't recall.
Yeah, I don't recall.
I don't recall that. This Abdul, you do recall. No, I don't recall that.
Unfortunately, I recall that the BYU game last year was not played in November. And once again, it's not going to be played in November. I'm disappointed. Talking about if it's the right play in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes and our episode is brought to you by our great friends at Game Time. Looking into tickets for your next big event, whether it's a concert, comedy, or sports game, finding the right tickets at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Picks, that app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Picks for a while now, and here are just a few things I love. Number one is the seat view. It's a game changer, right? Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like from the venue. It's so reassuring. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value. It was a steal. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options. It's something if something comes up too. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. That's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, all caps, no spaces, for $20 off. Download today. Last minute tickets, lowest price is guaranteed with our friends at Game Time. I wasn't lying. Spencer McLaughlin back for a second segment. All right, Spencer, you live in Utah. We were just referencing that with the whole Southern Utah fun thing. But look, here's the deal. I don't like that this BYU game is not in November once again. I guess we can talk about why the logic is in a moment, but I just feel like I think it's the best rivalry in the Big 12. Am I biased? Yeah, you can see all the Utah stuff in the background, but I do think this rivalry deserves to be played on rivalry weekend. I think it would be an awesome nightcap, like that late night Big 12, old Pac-12, rest in peace Pac-12 that we love. Like that's what this rivalry has the potential to be. And I think just throwing it in the middle of October, and they even moved it up. Like it was later last year, they moved it up. I don't like it. How do you look at it?
Well, the Big 12, for some reason, has an aversion to embracing rivalry weekend. I don't quite understand what that is. You may be getting into the race car game a little bit later than everyone else, but why are you still not putting a car out on the track? You might not have the driver or the pit crew yet to go and win the race, but you're never going to catch the cars in front of you if you don't enter the race. And yeah, BYU-Utah is the best rivalry in the Big 12. And sure, it'll be really fun no matter when it is played. It could be a week 0 game for all anybody cares, and you're going to sell out either stadium, and it's going to be hostile and chippy, and then one athletic director is going to want to leave the conference. Just completely normal things that happen over the course of a rivalry game. It's just the way emotions boil over. And I don't quite get what the thinking is. I suppose, a rivalry draws more viewers. So if we have it when everyone else doesn't have them, then you have an advantage there. But the game is played October 18th. Correct me if I am wrong, JT. I believe that's third Saturday in October, Alabama, Tennessee, right?
You're 1,000% correct, sir.
So I just look at what the Big 12 has done here, and I don't like it. I don't like, yes, I'm going to enjoy the game and everything that comes with it on and off the field, no matter when it is played. But there is a build to rivalry week. The stakes get put even higher, not just to have a conference game that moves you up or down in the standings, but to know what your postseason standing is. Are you playing this game to get bowl eligible then and there? That can add spice to a rivalry game. Or are you playing this game to make the Big 12 championship game. That can add to a rivalry game. Those sorts of things, if you have the opportunity to maximize the climb to what the stakes of the game are, you put it the last week of the regular season. There is a reason the Iron Bowl and the game are played in the last week of the regular season. It's because how do we maximize the stakes? You put it right there so that a team is one game away from getting here or getting there. And maybe both teams go into it, at 8-3, and they're not going to make a conference championship game, and the stakes are still great. But this is absolutely a rivalry that is top 10 in all of college football, maybe even top 5 for me in terms of matchups I most want to watch. And it belongs in that upper pantheon of great college football rivalries, which are played last week of the regular season. There are other great ones that get played third Saturday in October, Florida, Georgia. Like, you can keep going down the list, but this is one to me that comes off as a fumble to put in that particular spot.
We 1000% agree. I mean, even like you have a great sign in your background, my friend, College Game Day.
Thank you.
That's the one thing that I think about. I'm like, okay, if it's not rivalry weekend, you have a better chance of College Game Day. But the first thing I would say to whoever brought that up in the meeting, like, oh, if we put it here, is what are the odds that Alabama-Tennessee won't be a top 20 matchup? And look at how heavy we saw Game Day go on the SEC a year ago. Do we really think they're going to miss that? I mean, one of those teams has to be so bad, and I don't see that with the talent. Like, I know people are a little frustrated with Kalen DeBoer, but I still think it's still Alabama, it's still Tennessee. So that's where it just feels like
I don't think either team's schedule is going to put them in a position for it to not be a premier College Game Day consideration, because Bama is going to be fine. DeBoer is going to be fine. He's got Ryan Grubb back as his offensive coordinator. They will be just fine. But Tennessee, on the other side, was just in the college football playoff, and they also have, I think, a pretty favorable start to their season. Their big non-conference game is Syracuse, and I think Q's had a great season last year. They're not going to be as good because Kyle McCord won't be there. So the Vols could very well be unbeaten or one loss. Bama will be unbeaten or one loss. And frankly, you would have to have 4 combined losses between those teams for it to not be a game day consideration that would be a notch above BYU-Utah. So you not only, I guess I do kind of understand the thinking from the Big 12 of, hey, let's take this rivalry game and put it, in non-rivalry week to highlight it. But you're concerned on the one hand about going up against big-time rivalries that with bigger brands and whatnot, and then you're just going to go toe-to-toe. You put it on the same Saturday as Alabama-Tennessee? What are you doing?
Exactly.
That defeats the whole purpose. At least put it on a Saturday where there isn't a legitimate named rivalry that people pick up on, that you're going to have ESPN go to for game day to highlight your conference in that matchup. So, yeah, I think when you put that factor into it, I think it's an even bigger fumble.
It is. I mean, Spencer, correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I'm just trying to, obviously, the game, that's going to be noon, big noon kickoff. We know that whole controversy that's been a thing with Ohio State, Michigan. But then that night, it will be the Iron Bowl. That's what ESPN will market it as. They'll put the Iron Bowl at that time. And there's maybe another rivalry I'm forgetting. But what would be this would be the perfect late night, final round. Let the Big 12 have their moment. This is when the Pac-12 used to have their moment, that late night, 10:30 time slot or wherever it is. Just like this.
Well, the branding of Pac-12 After Dark was simultaneously great and a contributor, not a primary, but a contributor to the downfall of the conference, because not as many people watch when it's on later at night, but there's also a lot of value because there's still a lot of people watching and no one else can provide that time slot. And so that's something that, when the Pac-12 originally, and now again with their ongoing media rights negotiations with the New Look Conference, when they go to television executives, there's no other option. There is no power conference that can provide college football games worth viewing late at night. There just isn't. That's part of the reason the Big 12 wanted to get BYU and Utah and the Arizona schools, is so that they could have a stronger presence in the Mountain Time Zone, in Colorado too. So that value is very real, but also a geographic reality that's a drawback on the other hand, because you limit the upside of viewership that you can have.
You're right. That's the unfortunate.
And by the way, Alabama's schedule starts like this leading up to Tennessee. At Florida State, that should be a win. Louisiana Monroe, Wisconsin at home, at Georgia, that's tough. Host Vandy, at Missouri. That's 2 losses maximum. Tennessee goes Syracuse in Atlanta. That'll be a win. East Tennessee, host Georgia. Frankly, I think that's a toss-up game. But even if they lose that, it's then UAB at Mississippi State hosting Arkansas. Again, worst case scenario, 2 losses.
Yeah.
So I just don't see it. And even if they have 2 losses at that point, they'll still be ranked. That'll be enough. And it's a brand matchup. That crimson cursive A, the iconic orange T, like they're not going to pass that up.
No, I mean, that's what it's February 4th, and we're basically confirming that Utah BYU won't be College game day. And that right there is the biggest miss in this, I think, from me. I know a lot of people are frustrated with certain things about the schedule, but and as you said, there's a lot of rivalries that people aren't happy. So massive miss there. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Spencer, always appreciate you stopping by and making the time. You're the man. Make sure you guys head over and check out Locked On College Football. It does Locked On Ducks too, so a little bit of everything over there as well. Spencer, you're the man. Thanks for coming and hang out.
Anytime, JT. Appreciate it.
We are going to be talking more things schedule when Locked On Utes returns in 1 moment. Thanks again for Spencer McLaughlin for stopping by. And just as we wind down this episode of Locked On Utes, just as we've had a chance to look over this schedule. So let's look over the full thing, non-conference included. UCLA, the opener. Then Cal Poly, then Wyoming. Then is where the Big 12 stretch gets interesting. But first of all, I'll say, I think Utah's going to go 3-0. We'll talk more about the UCLA game. Yes, the Utah program and Bruins programs are both not coming off great years. To me, there is a difference between the overall direction and state of the Utah program than there is the UCLA program. So let's talk about the rest of the Big 12 schedule, the meat and potatoes of it. And I guess we didn't go game by game yet. So you start at home against Texas Tech, then you're on the road against West Virginia. Then you get your bye. Then you get to host Arizona State. Then you go on the road to take on the Cougars, not very far. Then you're at home against Colorado. Then you're at home against Cincinnati. Then you're on the road then on the road at Baylor, then at home against Kansas State, then on the road taking on Kansas. It's a tough schedule. I already mentioned you play of your 9 conference games, 8 of the teams finished in the top 10 a season ago. And I would personally argue, I did my own personal Big 12 rankings earlier today. Almost everyone that Utah plays, with the exception of Cincinnati, and I actually have Colorado just outside of my top 10 teams for next year too for the Big 12. Almost everyone is going to be, including, like, as we sit here today, Texas Tech, Arizona State, BYU, Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas are all capable of winning the conference. Technically, anyone is because of what Arizona State did last year, but like I would put them all as solid conference contenders. So the question then comes, as I kind of even said in the cold open, right? Like, can Utah win the conference? Is it a favorable schedule? I do think it is still for Utah because of the breaks they get with the byes, no back-to-back road games, that stuff too. I also just think I got a lot of faith in this Utah team. I talked about it on the show yesterday. This defense, it's still Morgan Scalley's defense. I like Jason Beck. I think the offense, I think the defense could take a step back because of some of the talent they lost. The offense, to me, should make a major leap forward. Even if they don't get to Jason Beck's team average, 31 points per game? I don't see how Utah's not 5 points per game better with Devin Dampier. He's that dynamic. He's that good of a player. I feel like it comes together. So when I look at this schedule, when I look at the breaks, when I think about the fact that also, as we discussed, I think Utah will be playing their best ball of the season come late November. Right now, I would say 9-3 is what I'm feeling for this Utah schedule. Could I see 8-4? Absolutely. Similar to what Kansas State was last year. We're like, oh, it's a disappointment for Kansas State, but they were in all the games. They just ended up losing 4 conference games because you play good teams. I do think they can. I think Utah could also win 10 games of this schedule. That's tough. I'm not predicting that right now. Knowing myself, I'll probably come around to that by the time we hit August. But I do think this is a schedule that has a lot of quality opponents, a lot of opportunity for quality wins. And I trust this Utah team, right? Even Texas Tech, they got all the hype, the portal class, all that. I know, but they haven't done it yet. They haven't put it all together. Arizona State did it once, and we can do the same thing I'm going to do right here with Utah. And I get that, but it's just true. You could do this with every team every year. So that's why I'm going to do this right now. Texas Tech, I want to see it come together. West Virginia, first-year head coach. Arizona State, they lost Scadaboo. It was the heart of that team. Can they bounce back? BYU, rivalry games are always close. Anything can happen. I think the Buffs team was Shedeur and Travis. Were there other parts and pieces? Of course. But that was everything to this team, and they lost it. Cincinnati, Utah better beat Cincinnati. I said that last year, but I used to they didn't, but they better beat Cincinnati. Baylor, I thought Spencer made a great point earlier when he said, is Baylor a flash in the pan, or are they going to be legit this season? I don't know with the Bears. Also, Utah's beaten Baylor 2 times in a row now, so that gives me a little confidence going into that game. And I'm old enough to remember when everyone in Baylor wanted to fire Dave Aranda. Kansas State, that's a great game. I can't wait for that one in Rice-Eccles Stadium. And I just think that'll be a tough physical game. That to me will be a Big 12 conference championship elimination game, probably. Maybe I'll be wrong, but I think that's what it'll end up being. I think Iowa State and Kansas State were involved in the game like that 2 years ago. Then that last one against Kansas. I think that'll be another hard-fought game. I could see that being another conference championship eliminator too, but I just feel like this Utah team is ready. I think they'll be playing their best ball of the season when we reach that point, and it's incredibly exciting to see this schedule finally built, assembled, know the matchups are, be able to plan our trips and all the things of that nature. And as I said, I like it. I think you had a tough list of opponents this year. Last year, you had an easier one and you squandered it. And some of those opponents were Arizona State, TCU were better than they were supposed to be. Oklahoma State and Arizona, of course, also were worse than that. But this is a schedule that if you go 11-1, or you're 11-2 if you lose in the conference title game, you can absolutely get in the college football playoff with this schedule. There's good brands, there's good teams, and Utah's right there too. Utah, I'm betting on their consistency of the program. I'm just gonna. I don't see them having a under 500 year again. Could they have an 8-4 year again? Of course. Really good teams on this schedule. We've talked about that a ton now, but I like this Utah team to bounce back. They fit all the qualities, as I talked about on my show yesterday with Drake, of a team that you would expect to bounce back to. So still a couple months away from seeing if they actually can do it, but I like their chances. I'm a Utah man. What else could I say, right? And I'm sure most of you who listen at this point are too. So we're going to continue to talk about this schedule all week long, the games, the matchups. We'll do a schedule prediction here soon too, but definitely going to talk some recruiting on tomorrow's show. Brian Brown's going to come on. We're going to talk about the best players in the class of 2026, all of them in the state of Utah, an episode you do not want to miss. Thank you again for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network and hope you'll rejoin us tomorrow.